Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again with another video for Film Fanatic, the YouTube channel. This is my first show where I will be doing back to kind of the original format of doing just standalone films. I just finished up another series of videos that were all where I covered movies that were all adaptations or they were greatly inspired by the classic story The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, which came out in 1923. That was super fun. It was 4 videos that I did. I just finished the last one this morning and it's uploading now. So, super fun. So, today's show is going to be, like I said, back to the kind of original format. So last night I had the pleasure of going to the Waldo Theater in Waldoboro, Maine, which is I live in Northport and it's about an hour or so from here. The Waldo Theater has been around for years and years and years, and I had a pretty deep connection to that place years ago. The people or the town of Waldoboro that owns the theater, they also had this other place called that was kind of connected to the theater for a while called the Waldo Theater Annex. And it's basically like a house, a really really old house that was owned by the community, and it essentially became like almost like a museum. And there used to be a jazz jam that went on for probably 20 years in that place, and it was a really great thing, a really great learning experience. I used to go there when I first came to Maine. They used to have a jazz jam there, and I used to go there when I was in my 20s and I was still in college, and there was a jam that was going on there, and I got to eventually sit in and I would play with a lot of these guys. And it was run by Charlie Batchelor, who was a really great piano player. And when he was younger, he had a pretty amazing career in music. He was primarily a music teacher for the later part of his life. He was an amazing piano player and just an incredible musician. When I met him, he was in his 70s, but he was still really functional. But he was a super interesting guy. I learned a lot of stuff from him, and I his big kind of claim to fame was when he had a band, a jazz fusion group in the 70s that was called Osmosis, and they had put out a few albums, and I believe they were released in the 70s on CBS Records. And their big thing was that group opened up for the Miles Davis quartet at the Newport Jazz Festival. Pretty amazing. And so he had a really big career at one point in the 70s, and then later as he got older, he kind of retired a little bit from that lifestyle and started to run this jam in Waldoboro, of all places. And I would go there just as a fan or a spectator, and then eventually I got the nerve to sit in and play with them. And then over a couple of years, I was fortunate enough to where Charlie wanted to play with me regularly, and he hired me to kind of be part of his band. And then we started to play quite a few gigs. We would do a series of all of these different jazz gigs, and we play, different clubs. We'd play like private parties, different functions, and I was so incredibly green and inexperienced or unexperienced at that time that he had a lot of patience with me, and I looked to him as a serious mentor, and I learned a lot about music through him. And eventually, he unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and some mutual friends that were part of the jam that were, and I eventually became the house drummer for that jam. We kind of took it over and kept kept the whole thing going for about 3 or 4 years afterwards. So, and then we also, when I was playing with Charlie, we also had played a few shows and also some gigs where we played in the Waldo Theater. And back then, the Waldo Theater was kind of a rundown place. It wasn't really taken care of. It wasn't really, there wasn't any there wasn't any budget to really maintain that place. It was a pretty rundown place. So I have a long history to that place. And in the last couple of years, the there's been this explosion, like a renaissance thing happening at this theater where they got the theater got all of these great funds, and they basically turned this place that was at one point, you know, pretty a pretty dilapidated building. They turned it into now I think one of like the state of the art facility, and it's an amazing place. They have just an incredible sound system in there. I think it's probably, you know, for my money, the best place to go see a movie. I mean, it's incredible. Like the screen is great, the projection's great, the whole technical setup is great, the seating is awesome. It's a beautiful facility. And there's been a group that started there, I believe last year, called Waldo After Dark, and it's basically a little collective of people who their whole thing is they started showing all of these super low budget sci-fi horror exploitation movies. And as people know, that is my jam. That is my love. I love all kinds of films, but that style of filmmaking is my favorite. And so I haven't been able to go to a lot of shows there. I've been to this. I went last night and we saw. I went with my friend Erica Patrick and we saw this incredible movie that I had never seen before, and I was just blown away by it. And it's called Hobgoblins, and it came out in 1988 and it was directed by Rick Sloan. Blown away by this movie. It was just an incredible experience. It was so fun. I laughed my ass off. It was so ridiculous and absurd, but so damn entertaining. And it was just great. It was just awesome. And I hung out. We talked with a lot of the people who were there, the folks who run this whole program. Super cool people, and we all ended up going out for drinks afterwards, and it was great. Super cool people. They're really passionate, really knowledgeable about what they do, about what they're doing, and they're super enthusiastic and they're really creative people, and it's great. And so I really, really recommend for people to check this theater out and support it because these are movies that, for me, are my favorite. This is my favorite genre, part of the same of my favorite genre. And if you want a real unconventional experience and to get something that you can't really get anywhere else at all, this is the place. Like if you want a really fun experience and you get to see movies that no other theater or no other organization would even have the audacity to show. I just think it's awesome, and it's a gem of a place. Wonderful people that run it, and to see how this theater is growing is unbelievable. They have some huge events coming up. John Waters is going to be there coming up in June, and for 2 nights, and it's totally sold out. And of all places, this whole thing is happening in Waldoboro, Maine, where there isn't all that much going on, and it has, it really is emerging as a destination, and they're doing more music things there. I have a show there in June, which I'm excited. I saw that there's more announcements for more shows coming up, but this film series, Waldo After Dark, is just tremendous, and they just put out great. They're just showing great, fantastic movies. So I highly, I can't recommend it enough to go out and support this wonderful thing. And getting back to this actual movie, Hobgoblins, Again, I never seen it before, and it is hilarious. It is kind of the epitome of 80s exploitation. It was directed by Rick Sloan. And Rick Sloan was, I believe, a pretty prolific filmmaker. He directed Vice Academy in 1989, and also another, I guess, a sequel to that film called Vice Academy, also by the same name in 91. Hobgoblins, which came out in 88. Just an amazing movie. Blood Theater in 1984. Another rendition of Vice Academy. There's also a sequel to Hobgoblins 2. I never seen this movie. I definitely have never seen the sequel. There's like three or four um, sequels to Vice Academy, which is crazy. They all came out in the late 80s, or I should say late 90s. The Bikini Academy, which came out in 1996. Um, Marked for Murder in 1989. Pretty prolific, pretty prolific director. I remember, I definitely knew about him, and definitely had heard of the name and was familiar with some of his stuff, but I don't believe I'd ever seen any of his films. Um, and this movie is just bonkers crazy. I mean, literally the creation of the hobgoblins, like they're not even puppets. They're actually like these stuffed animals, and they're kind of like thrown in the scenes. And when they first appear on the big screen, it is just so goddamn hilarious. Like I laughed my ass off, and I mean, it's so low budget and so utterly ridiculous, but just so amazing. And again, it came out in 1988. It's like the epitome of that time period. It's like it's stepping into it, or it's experiencing like a time capsule of all things 80s that are just so terrific, and why we'll always go back to that decade. Just so tremendous. Rick Sloan, he was an American cult director, filmmaker. He was also a writer, producer, and film editor and cinematographer. Um, some of his films, which is hilarious, were which totally makes sense. A lot of his films were actually featured on the wonderful show Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is just an amazing show. Where basically you have these two puppets that make fun of and critique uh, exploitation movies, and it's just amazing. One of the best shows ever. And this movie is definitely like elements of horror, definitely sci-fi, and it's definitely a comedy. And I love that it. I was when we were watching it when my friend Aaron, I went with my friend Aaron Kirkpatrick, and we were watching it last night. There's all of this. Well, virtually every scene, there's all of this like sexual innuendo, but yet everything is implied, but yet it doesn't show anything. And I guess this movie is rated PG, and it shows, and it's hilarious because it's got this super sexual thing going through all the entire movie, but you never see anything, and it's kind of like almost like softcore porn. That might even be a strong term for it, but and it's hilarious. It's so ridiculously crazy, and these hobgoblins have this ability to basically take over humans and psychically take over their brains and their bodies, and they're able to enslave them and take the people the people that they enslave. They're able to, through their psychic power, bring about their fantasies and control them to do various murderous acts. And it's just so bonkers and so ridiculous. But I love this movie. I've never seen it before. I'm definitely gonna look for this movie in my travels to eventually buy it. One of the things too that we talked about when I talked to the crew of World After Dark after the film, because again this was like the second time I have been to these events, and I'm trying to go to more. The quality, like the sight, the picture and the audio, the sound was just amazing. And I had asked them what's the format that they use, and if they use like original film. My first impression was that it was actual film, but what they actually do is they get a hold of 4K editions of these great exploitation movies because it's really cheap to do. But and then for them to actually, if they were to acquire the actual film, it would be really really hard technically, but tremendously expensive. And but the quality is breathtaking. I mean, literally breathtaking. I was just blown away by how beautiful it was. The picture was just eye popping, and the sound was just incredible. And I think it's definitely the way to go for the movie going experience. It's definitely the best format. I think it's the best venue overall. So yeah, please support this theater. It's amazing. They have just an amazing roster of movies coming up. And this whole series, like I said, it's Waldo After Dark. They specialize in all the wacky movies that are part of the exploitation world from the 70s, 80s. Amazing. So this is Jason Dean. So if you like this channel, please support it, subscribe to it, and keep the comments coming. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.